I also would like to say something else in conclusion about wages for housework. I learned that a woman named Mary Inman in Southern California had been expelled from the American Communist Party for her advocacy of wages for housework. This was in the 1940s. This is just the way my mind works. She had come to Southern California and her studies of the endless working day, of unpaid labor. She had come from Oklahoma, where she had been active in the IWW. My father had left Oklahoma at the same time in the Depression, but instead of going west, he went east. So just for me, it was a roots moment. And I'll end there.
Right, I think we've probably got about 20 minutes, maybe, for discussion. Maybe a bit more. So, people want to start making comments? It's the time to do it.
I just want to thank my fellow panelists for helping me understand my own 30 years of history. Thank you.
That's fine.
Yes, thank you very much for all your wonderful and at times moving contributions. I just wanted to say two things, and something that I think is important to emphasize. One, you mentioned one of the moments which led to the production of one of your notes, the one no many yeses notes. Monty mentioned the experience of being in Chiapas. I was there with you. That's where I met you, Monty and John. It's important because it was 96 and it was a few years after the other issue on the new enclosure came out, right? And as George said before, the original plan or idea, not plan, was to bring some knowledge in the future crossing this tunnel of capital's payback time, and that's essentially began in that way, and then led to the conceptualization of continuing enclosure, an idea that was so powerful that picked up my own work, and that was fundamental. But I think in that moment, in Chiapas, I think that is where we started to puzzle about hope. That was the Zapatista's message. One no many yeses was a moment which was really, really crucial. I remember when the Zapatistas asked us to sit down and write our report at the end of these days of meetings. We were in this in the jungle, surrounded by Mexican military. We were hosted, given hammocks and food and places to meet, and in our maize and our tables of discussion, we were all sitting down, coming from all over the world and across ideological lines. It's very important that moment because there was before any World Social Forum or any Seattle or anything, was the moment in which we felt the loss of the 70s and the repressions in the 80s. And what was very interesting there was we were sitting around the table having 2 or 3 Zapatistas within their own balaclava taking notes, not saying a word. That really was interesting, very interesting, because generally you went to a meeting, invited, and you got, in the old day you were preached, you were told what to do. Here is our struggle and what we do. Now in this particular case, they were just sitting there all day long, taking notes, wanting to learn from us, and in fact we were learning from them, incredibly. And the only thing that they asked us was, well, you got to write a document in the end. You know, you got so many good ideas, we'll try to put them together in a certain way. And that was an amazing challenge. And I want to emphasize this, because we spent nights trying to put together different, Trotskyists, feminists, trade unionists, environmentalists from all our different worlds, autonomists, anarchists, all different worlds, trying to combine together documents, which in the end we did in that particular context simply because we owed it to the Zapatistas. Everybody felt in that particular moment we did it. But it was a moment of recomposition, minor moment of recomposition. But to me, I think what was important is a work we have to do at a much broader scale, is somehow tap on that experience and finding a way to really build upon it in the real, in the course of our own struggles. And this one thing I want to emphasize. The other thing is what Peter said about the history from below. I think you got a point there. But maybe but there is a sense of the history from below. I don't think we should outright rejecting that thing, but there is a sense of history from below, in a sense, emphasize the dialectic, the capitalist dialectic of recuperation of those struggles from below. And that's the challenge, because if you go through the historical processes, the history from below corresponds also to a history from above, a process of recuperation, repression, and cooptation of those struggles. And the United States actually has got a history of that which far exceeds many other countries. But perhaps history from the ground emphasizes the smashing of that dialectic. They're going beyond the dialectic of capital, the dialectic of recuperation. Put us in a different, perhaps, frame of mind. Because there can be a history from the ground, but there cannot maybe be a history from the sky unless when we are dead, I suppose.
May I make a quick comment? Massimo, I want to say that history is with us. I want us to find that and to show it. That history is behind us. And it can help us, not just as examples and courage, but the whole mighty torrent is waiting to be melted by us.
I have just a couple quick things. One, George mentioned the 70s and into the 80s as carrying knowledge forward through the repression, and that's certainly true, but I think it's also true, certainly for me. And I think as I reread our materials last spring, that you can also see in the materials the continued looking for the moment when we would get past that repression. That there was where are these struggles going? And it's both a critical sense of how the struggles were not likely to do that because of their composition and nature, but looking for them and trying to support them in ways that would begin to turn that around to a positive recomposition of the class. In the discussions that Massimo reminded us of, because Massimo and Harry and George and John and I were among the dozens working at the so-called economics mason in Roberto Barrios, deep in the forests in Chiapas. And yes, there was this very interesting composition of people in which the Zapatistas took notes. But one thing I will not forget is that one of the sharpest debates at the very end was the argument that the five of us were putting forward continuously. That to understand the crisis, you have to understand the class struggle that fomented the crisis. And in fact, that language did not appear in the final document because there were a whole bunch of people, traditional Marxists, who refused to accept that position. They would not sign a document that had it. And we said, to our mind, in part the spirit of the Zapatero, more important to get the rest of us out there, we obviously aren't going to put aside what we think as we go forward. And yet, and so I'm coming back to that because I think we need to understand that about today and going forward.